There we go. I don't even know where those came from, to be honest with you. I was thinking about it over the weekend, and it's like, man, there was so much reflection over that first 6 months. Today is the 6 month mark, and it's like, oh my gosh, like it's hard to believe it's been that long already. And there was just so much. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fit this into one reel. There's no way.
Mm-hmm. Looking back
So
on it,
I
are you
started.
ever looking back on it? Are you ever like, I can't believe I said that?
No, not really. I haven't come across anything yet where I was
Nice.
like, no, I mean, like, I honor how I feel at that moment. Sometimes, sometimes looking back, I'm like, there was a couple parts in the videos that I had to like cut out. And I was like, we probably don't want to show that. But no, I remember how I felt at that moment or a time, and I'm like, well, it's okay. So
And so reflecting back, part of this is a Cliff Notes version of the first 6 months, but also too, hopefully it's a way for you to like look at all the progress you've made in 6 months.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, come a long way.
Are you the type of athlete too who like, I think a lot of us struggle to recognize all the advancement, all the growth we've had, right? Because we're so forward thinking, right? So you are
Yeah,
like, hey, I'm going to lose this weight. I'm losing this body percentage. I want to get these inches off, but like take a second and recognize the last 6 months. I mean, even the video of like just your face, like your
yeah,
face, how much your face has changed. You're like, oh my gosh, that was
yeah,
only 6 months ago.
yeah. It was. It's crazy. Yeah, a lot. I remember watching that first one. I'm like, oh my goodness, like it's amazing the differences in
Hmm.
just your skin and your glowiness, like when you're eating all the right things and you're getting enough sleep. And I mean, it just changes your complexion.
When like you're actually taking care of your body. Who would have thought that would
Right,
have
right.
worked out, right?
It's amazing. It's a miracle. But yeah.
I like that. So before we jump in, we have vacation for you in T minus about 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's gonna be cool. Yeah.
Are you getting excited for this?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Now,
It's been a while since I've been out to California.
are you the last minute packer planner, or do you have like things planned and packed days beforehand?
I'm a project manager. I plan. I was like, no, I wish. This was a source of contention in month 3, where, like I'm trying to get dates on a calendar. And the reason that I do that is because it's like when you're trying to do so much, you have to know when you're not going to have, like available time, especially if you have to travel, like airline ticket. Like you can't, I mean, you can, but you try to buy airline tickets the day before, you're going to pay for it. So I'm like, it's just, and then I think you couple that with what I do for a living. It's like I'm a project manager. Like my job is to mitigate all, all possible last minute go wrongs. That's what I do. So um yeah, I'm excited.
So last time we talked, two big things stuck out in my head. Thing number one, sent you over Circle Maker with Mark Batterson. You speed read that thing and put me to shame on how slow I read. Um, I was just like,
It was good.
you read that book in 24 hours.
I couldn't put it down once I started reading it.
I literally was just like, you're a speed reader. You
It
are
was,
a speed reader. But then from
yeah.
that, though, I was really encouraged and challenged by the fact that you were like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do some fasting and I'm going to take some time and just fast and connect with the Lord about like aligning my goals, which anyone who chooses to do that is huge. anyone who's choosing, deprive is not the right word, but to choose to fast and go through that to get clarity that's amazing.
It had been a while, so I figured like it was time. And I think there was some very timely things in the book, like making sure that, like, why do we have certain goals? I think this goes back to the very first time we talked. And one of the questions that you had asked me was like, why do you want this? And I was like, my goal was a little shallow, I think. I was like, well, I want to be the first person in CrossFit to that 300 club, like that was really, really important to me. I'm like, well, why is it important to you? So it had me thinking about some of those more surface level things and like, are the goals that I have set for myself and everything that I'm working on this year, are they honoring God at the same time? So it gave me a chance to do that. So I've actually done that twice in a row. I did it last week and then or the week before, and then I did it again last week. And, it might just become part of a normal weekly practice. I'm kind of liking it, but, yeah, I just feel really peaceful right now.
Is that something in your faith background that you've done before, where you fasted before to find some clarity and direction?
Yeah. I don't know if well, sometimes, I mean, I have fasted before, but I don't know if I mixed like fasting with deliberate prayer and kind of turning my house into Jericho, like
nice.
I hadn't done that before. So that was cool. But I don't know what I went into it looking for, but I know that I came out with like, I just feel like I'm in a really good place. One of the things that both Miranda and Carolyn were concerned about was, like, Athena, if you don't hit your benchmarks by your certain dates, what's going to happen? And I remember the first time that I had lost weight, and I think we might have talked about this, that, I set a goal to lose 200 pounds that first year, and like, that's almost unthinkable, for most people. And I get down to the end of that year, and it's day 365, and I didn't lose 200 pounds. I lost 187.5, and I was devastated. Like, the world fell apart, devastated. Everything stopped. It was screw the world. I took it hard because I missed it by 13. But I learned a lot in the following 6 months after that. Like, why did I do that to myself? Like, why couldn't I have just been grateful and proud of 187? Like, it wasn't good enough. So over the years, since I did it that first time, I just learned so much. And I'm like, you can't do that to yourself again, because despite all best efforts, there are still going to be some things out of your control, no matter how right you do it, no matter how perfect you think you're doing everything. Some things, like time, is just not something that we control.
And we've talked about it too, right? Like progress over perfection. And just like hearing you audibly say, I lost 187.5 pounds in a year. There's 365 days in a year, right? That is insane. But like, I love too the fact that you're like, now you recognize, like, I beat myself up over that. So it'd be cool to hear like, hey, what would Athena present day say to Athena back then? But would Athena back then even hear you? Or would she be so stubborn, like, no, I didn't hit 200. It doesn't even count.
Well, today was a really good example, because, Athena present day talked to Athena present day. Like, if we look at this year and what I needed to lose this year was 148. You take 148, you divide that by 2, it was 74. So the benchmark was, I want to be at 74 by July 15th, today. That's halfway. I had it all figured out. I get on the scale this morning and it said 73. And I'm like, okay, here we are again. No panicking. Like it wasn't one of those moments where the goalpost was reset. It was more this time. It was more like, you know what? I'll take it. Close enough, And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. 73 out of 74 is not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, hey, let me go use the bathroom and pee real quick. And now we're at 74, right?
Right.
Let
I'm
me
like,
just go
it'll
do that.
probably be at 74 on Thursday. So who cares?
Do you think though too that, and this is not just you, but sometimes people get hyper focused on the number, and like I like the fact that you do inches as well too, and body fat percent. Like you are doing the totality of what should be done. But I know
Yeah.
just working with athletes in the past, they'll get so hyper focused on the number. Well, the number's not moving like I wanted to. I want to be this weight, and I'm always like, well, tell me when you get to that weight, like what's the significance of it? And a lot of them just have this number in their head, like, well, I think I'd be happy if I was at that weight. And I always struggle to hear that because I'm like, you're correlating your happiness to a number. And I mean, you've been there. We know this. Like, are you truly going to be happy? So if I said, Athena, if you hit 175 pounds, would that bring you happiness? And you'd probably get there and be like, you know what, I want to be 165. We'd keep moving that goalpost.
I think if you had asked me that question day one, 7 years ago, I might have given you a very different answer because back then I did believe that everything I was feeling at that time, like the depression, the frustration, all of that was connected to what I weighed. Like my life wasn't what it was supposed to be because I wasn't physically where I wanted to be. And it wasn't until, I lost that first 187 pounds where I realized I wasn't any happier. I didn't get what I thought I was going to get out of it, which I think is a reason why a lot of people struggle when they get down is because they think that all their other problems suddenly, go away, and they don't.
Do you think that some of us may not face those other problems because we hyper focus? Well, if I can get to this weight, all of that will subside when we really haven't gotten to the root cause of some of those other problems.
I can't speak for everybody, but I know what I did. I didn't know it then, but I know it. I didn't know what else it was. I only thought it was that, because that's all I had,
So it
wasn't until that happened that I realized it.
So I texted this to you last night. So in part one of your Instagram reel, we'll call it the recap, right? You said something that like it just triggered in my brain. And it's not just you, right? I've heard this before, but you said something that just really, really stuck out to me. And it was, I feel like I'm a project, or I feel like I'm too big of a project. This is when you were talking about Mr. Hillard taking you on as an athlete. You're like, I just feel like I'm too big of a project. Was that the kind of the correct wording we were using?
Yeah, I said I was a project. Yeah. That's what I said.
And like that really bothered me, and it got to me because in my mind, like I felt like you were just viewing yourself in this like Rubik's cube, right? And I'm just this big project, and you got to take time, and you got to figure this out, and I don't know if someone can take this on. It's just so much, and it's so overwhelming. And then I just got to thinking of like, we all struggle with different things in life, like all of us do, right? There's a myriad of things we all struggle with, and like, how many of us think that like, this person can't help me, or I'm scared I'm going to be too much for them, or this is going to be too big of a project. Looking back, like, were you counting yourself out before it even started because you felt like you were too big of a project?
No, it was more, I mean, it's hard to say what I was thinking at the time. I don't remember. I don't even remember saying that, to be honest with you, but I do know I used to laugh and joke. It was coming more from a place of like I knew what I was getting myself into. Like I knew what this year was going to mean and everything that it was going to take. Like I didn't come into this with blinders on. Hiller may have, but I didn't. You know, like all these things that I think got discounted in the beginning, like mental health and all of they matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's you know, that's the other
part of it.
95% of your day.
Yep.
It's the other part that you have to deal with. So I knew what I was getting myself into. And when I say a project, I mean like, you know, I looked at myself in the mirror, you know, like this girl I couldn't do a whole lot. You know, I was still like, surgery happened a while ago, but it had just gotten to the point where I was able to do CrossFit confidently. Doesn't mean I was doing all the movements, but just being able to move. So to get from, I think, there to where I saw myself in my head a year later, is a lot of work.
And just even like you
A lot of work with like any project, there's going to be a lot of phases, you know,
yeah.
just like any project, there's going to be like this initiation period. There's going to be like some analysis time, some self-reflection, all of the project components that go into something I knew we were going to see at some point during this 12 months.
You're being such a project manager right now, just by the way.
I know.
You're being such a project manager.
It's coming out.
What I like though too is like, and this is just me, right? I like watching you post stuff of like, hey, when you were struggling to squat, right? When you were struggling to do a lunge, like I like that because that is the reality of your journey. And you know, you really queued up like, hey, you're going to do something hard every day, and that varies based upon person. Like you're like, hey, I'm going to go walk when it's freezing out here in Minnesota, but like showing that shows that like, hey, this is a project. But to your really good point, there's phases of this. So what may look hard right now, 6 months later, is not going to be as hard. I just often wonder how many people even hesitate to reach out and seek out help or seek out coaches because they think like, oh, I'm too big of a project. This is too much.
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, have you worked with athletes that have said that to you? Man, Athena, like I want to work with you, but I just think I'm too much. I'm too much of a project.
Has anybody said that to me? Yes.
Okay. How do you approach that?
I think a lot of that has to do with they have to get to a point internally where they can, that just means they're not ready is what they're saying. Like if I were to say like, oh, I'm so much. Well, I mean, it could mean a number of things. I've never really said that, so I don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, like I don't know if well, let's talk about Hiller. Hiller was a different story because, you know, I had followed him for a while, begrudgingly, saw a lot of his videos at the time. And I think it was more like his audaciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he came across like he could do it all. He knew all the answers. He could do it all. But he found out very quickly within 8 weeks, like, oh shit, this is harder than I thought. Well, no shit. You know what I mean? Like, what did you think we were doing here? So that's part of it. Like, I knew what I was walking into. Did you?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's valid too, right? Because now that we've come full circle and you've realized like, hey, I want to have a coach that can help me with the mental and the spiritual, a coach that can help me with moving, a coach that can help me with nutrition. knowing now, like, hey, there's a lot of components to this. And I think, like, as a coach myself early on, I did try to like figure it all out, do it all. And then I realized, gosh, probably a year ago, like, I coach a large group of athletes with a good friend of mine. Like, we have a sports psychologist on the team who helps with the mental side of it. We have physical therapists on the team who help with the injuries and the rehab, because the reality is we can't do it all. And when we try to act or think or know that we can do it all, that's not reality, right?
Well,
Like,
no, it's not. But I would say that there was two reasons for that split. The first reason was there's different things that we're focusing on. And part of that I feel like came from, I think part of that stems from a very archaic belief that if we just move and just eat better, that's all we need to do. Well, it's not. When you've used food your whole life, for comfort and to feel
yeah,
better,
that's
and you've
good.
used it in all of these situations, just moving on face value and eating better doesn't solve the problem. So I think some of that belief, like, oh, I'm just going to be able to send the programming and I'm just going to be able to, advise on what to eat and boom, that's it. It's not. It's definitely not. Now,
Well, that
I think that there's a difference though between like helping an athlete with mindset and just some of the maybe like just some of the things that you've helped me with, like just how I see things. Like, Athena, what's your goal? I want to be the first one to lose 300. Why? When I talk about mindset, I'm not talking about therapy. Hiller never had to deal with that. It was more like making sure that athlete isn't repeating the same problems that got them there in the first place, redirecting them, on the right path. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Well, and I've always held true to this at my affiliate, is like creating athletes is cool. Like, that's a cool thing to be able to have someone come alongside you, build up their potential, you help sharpen their axe to become a good athlete. But if you're not creating better humans, like,
Yeah.
what's the point? And we create better humans when we start to challenge the concepts that some of us hold true to ourselves. Like, I've got an athlete that I work with, a younger woman, and she's a great athlete. And she said something to me one day, and I was like, hey, you need to be able to communicate to me if your body's not feeling good. And she's like, well, I was raised just to push through and I'll be fine. And so, like, we've had to take time to break down that childhood concept of her being like, because she's an athlete growing up, and she was taught, you don't complain, you don't tell your coaches you're hurt, you just keep pushing through. And so trying to get to the root of that, more of our time is spent there than actually on like creating a better athlete right now. Because I've got to get to the core of that, to where communication from coach to athlete can be 100% authentic and open.
That's what I'm talking about with like the phases. That
Yep.
first phase is going to be some of that analysis work and some of that like self-reflection and getting to the core of like, why do you do the things that you do?
Yep. And I think going back, like, you could have a program like Carolyn could say, hey, you're going to eat this and that's it. And Miranda, but hey, you're going to move here and that's it. But if we don't get into some of the habits, some of the things that maybe we've had barriers in the past, right? It can be easy that we hyper focus on the movement and the losing, but not the internal. I spent a season of my life working at a men's rehab, and I told those men, I'd be like, hey, you can come in here and get clean, but still leave with the same issues that you have, because you've never taken the time to deal with them. You could be clean and sober, but you could still have all those issues. So like the ongoing focus, like, hey, we've got to get to that core root, right? I'm sure that you've seen like Shrek before, and it's like taking that onion and just peeling the layers of the onion back and like more and more back.
When I get into like discussions with like my own athletes, and this was a discussion point for myself early on too. And this is why I caution semaglutides and bariatric surgeries and things like that, because not because of the bullshit that gets thrown around like, oh, they're taking the easy way out, blah, blah, blah. No, it has more to do with the fact that that's only going to solve the exterior. It's not going to solve all the interior that got you there. So unless you're dealing literally with both of them at the same time, and you're part of a program where they structure that, all that mindset work and all that stuff that you're going to have to figure out. Like somebody told me a while back, they're like, well, Athena, like I like being on the semaglutides because it shuts off the food noise. And I was like, okay, I get the food noise and it's something that I totally understand. But how are you going to learn to get it under control if it's not turned on? If you never feel it, you don't have to deal with it. And what are you going to do when you get down to your ideal weight and they pull you off the drugs? And then what happens? You know what I mean? So it's not that I don't want to support people. It's just like, you have to know that this is part. If this is going to be truly long term and a forever thing, the mind work has to be part of what you do. You can avoid it, but the people that avoid it, I promise you, are part of that group where they're in that, recidivism groups where it's like 35% are going to gain it back in the first year. I'm one of those people because I didn't deal with, when I went down and I was in that chair, like there were still some things that I hadn't dealt with. And then it surfaced.
Like, very, very, very well said right there. And going back to doing hard things. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do is sit with yourself and sit with that junk inside of you. And like,
it's not
if
sometimes, and I assure you, it is the hardest thing.
And how many of us willfully do that? Willfully sit with,
it's hard.
Like Ivan, there's a rapper I listen to called Andy Mineo, and he talks about how we use our phones to basically ignore ourselves from dealing with the issues that we have. So we look at our phones and just freeze out. And he really goes into depth talking about like, what if we actually sat with our junk? And that's one thing I know you as a coach and me as a coach, like when I first started coaching people, I was ignorant enough to just think like, oh, this is just about like movement patterns and moving well and getting them in good community. And that's it. And the deeper you get into this, you're like, oh my gosh, there are deep-seated generational traumas that these people have. And the more you get to know them, the more that like you're helping them fight these battles. And to your great point earlier, if you want to look at people who've had successes because they've chosen to do that really hard internal work.
And we don't even have to really dive too far down into like the generational trauma. We could just stay at surface level and say there's a lot of generational habits. There's a lot of like sometimes just like the foods that we eat, the environments, our families are just why we choose to eat some of the foods that we do. Some of it has to do with like our upbringings, our culture. We don't even have to go down the trauma thing.
Well, and with the culture too, right? So you and I are in two very different parts of the United States. So you're Minnesota. Yeah, I'm South Carolina, good old folk down here. And not being from here, being from the north and moving down here, like one thing I've realized is the culture is so many things are centered around food. It's just the culture, right? You're going to church and they're having a potluck, or meals are all around celebrations. And there's this funny thing that happens here where when you celebrate through good, rich food. You don't celebrate through like chicken and rice. And early on when I moved down here, it was almost like I felt like outcasted because I chose not to partake in that food, just solely based on the fact that I had certain goals I was trying to reach. And it was interesting how I was approached. I was approached like I was being rude. And so like talking about like some cultural norms down here, like just talking to people that I work with, they're like, well, when we have family get-togethers and I bring my food, it becomes more of a problem because people think I'm better than them. And like that blows my mind because the reality is like, no, you're just trying to live longer. Like you want to be around longer for your kids, but yet there's this culture norm here that they fight head to head of like health and wellness and treat yourself.
Yes. I think that goes hand in hand with like one of the things that we talk about in the seminar. So one of the examples that we give is we're talking about like when people are trying to get healthy and it's Easter time and you tell them, for instance, okay, Athena, no more Cadbury eggs. Well, in somebody's brain, you tell them that they can't have Cadbury eggs on Easter, what are you actually telling them?
What are you telling them?
Suddenly there's no Easter.
Easter's
You know what I mean?
completely gone. Yeah.
Easter's gone. You know, if you can't have like chocolate Santas at Christmas, suddenly it's not Christmas anymore. You mean I gotta go through Christmas eating broccoli and carrots? It's not even Christmas.
Yeah, but that extreme. They go to that extreme. Yeah.
Extreme because it is like that.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's not just about like feeling a holiday or feeling a celebration. It's the historical, it's the familiar, you know, the way
Like the
that we were brought
nostalgia
up,
of it.
you know, like all the things and the nostalgic things that
Yep.
we associate with holidays or birthdays. You know, like this year was the first year that I didn't have a birthday cake. And I'm not going to lie, it felt a little weird because I'm like, is it even my birthday? You know what I mean? And I'm like, what do you mean I don't get carrot cake? This is bullshit, you know?
This is some bullshit. Here's a carrot.
Bullshit, you know? And it felt very weird to me sitting down that day. This was just like a month ago and having this bowl of like, I had this bowl of like yogurt with strawberries. Let me see, what else did I put on it? I put like, it was this different fruit. And then I put a little bit of like sugar-free syrup over the top and it was delicious. But I was like, this is my birthday cake. That sucks. Because what I really wanted was carrot cake.
Well, and yeah, there's a correlation. A friend of mine said this to me Friday night. We were at an event, and this is going to sound weird, but a buddy of mine was eating, and he had a ear of corn. And I was like, "You going to finish that corn?" He goes, "No." So I'm just sitting there eating this ear of corn. And someone goes, "Oh my God, I thought you were eating cake." And I was like, no, I'm just eating corn. And they're like, well, I would eat cake because cake brings me happiness and I want to be happy. And like, I didn't respond to it, but in the back of my mind I was just like, they literally correlate their happiness into cake, an inanimate object that is bringing them happiness. But they were born and raised in the South. So I was just like, yeah, that sounds about right. I've had a bad day. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I'm depressed, whatever it may be. I'm going to eat this cake, and this cake will make me happy for the next hour. But it never is going to solve the
like
underlying issue. Yeah, it's never going to solve the underlying issue of why I'm not happy. And so down here, like a lot of the people that I have worked with, like you said this, man, several times when we met early on, like they use food to cope and food to mask their emotions because that's what they grew up with. Their mother did it. Their grandmother did it, and it's went through generations, and it's just what they do.
They don't know anything else.
Yep, you're right. That's all I know. I'm
not saying it's impossible to get out of. It's just that you don't know what you don't know. So some of that is all that learned stuff that you have to go through when you're talking about doing something like this. Like you have to be, not only that you have to do it, you have to be willing to do it. And some people, I think I don't know if I had necessarily a hard part because I've always been pretty transparent about like where I struggle. And it's like, if it's where I struggle, I'll say it, whatever. But for a lot of people, like it's really tied to like a lot of pride, you know, like they don't want to admit like, hey, I use food for these things.
Do you think it's support too? Because I look at you and your support network, like aside from your crazy awesome mother, it appears that you have a strong support system where I've worked with athletes before where they may get guilt tripped by their spouse, by their family, by their loved ones because they're not indulging in what they used to.
I think that you're probably going to run into that more often than you don't.
How have you worked around that?
Well, first, it has more to do with that other person than it does,
100%.
You know, but well, when you're doing something like this, like it could require not hanging out with certain family members. It might require new friend circles. I had a friend who started this journey with me, and she I think she quit like at month 4 or 5, and it was fine. I supported her anyway, and I continued on. And we had been friends since high school, like 22 years. And we had gotten down to the end of that first year, like it was in December. And I had called her one night and she's like, well, you have all your CrossFit friends now. It was very like, one, it felt shitty. Two, it was like, why would you say something like that? But I think it came from a place where like she wasn't ready. And it upset her because there were certain things that we didn't have in common anymore. Food being one of them. So I tell people, like, if you're really in this and you say like you want change, this is one of those things that's probably going to come up. It's going to come up with a parent, a sister, a cousin, somebody that you're close to. It's going to come up with your friends. Like if you have a friend circle, for instance, and you're the only one getting healthy, pretty soon, guess what happens? You're not getting invited to things anymore because you're the one that brings the shitty food. Suddenly you're not getting invited. You're not, like, Athena's bringing the healthy food, it starts off with like little passive aggressive comments like, oh, chicken and salad. That sounds great. It'll start off with a little passive aggressive, and then it moves from passive aggressive to just downright aggressive. Like, could you bring something that everybody will eat, And then pretty soon you just don't get invited anymore. And then pretty soon, like, those people that are on this journey start getting like the backs turned from like their friends and family. And then people wonder why could they feel so alone? We have CrossFit, we have community. It's not like that. You're talking about people in their closest circles. Yes, we have community, but we also need family. And some of our closest, like my top 5, my fave 5, And that's what happens. And so like when we talk about like the struggle and like what people are going to have to go through on this, that's just part of it. I'm really upfront with most people. I'm like, when you say you want to do this, be prepared for all of it. It's a shitty conversation to have to prepare somebody for, but it's reality.
I like that I don't do that and I could do 100% better job, but I like that you lead with that, because even like listening to you talk, like so much applicable truth to my life. Like my wife and I, like there's certain friends who don't invite us out anymore because they've told us, well, you guys don't drink a lot and don't get drunk. So we just didn't want to invite you guys. And like in my mind, I'm just like, so our friendship is based upon if we're going to drink or not. And you're right. It is shitty and it does hurt. And so to look at my wife and just be like, yeah, hey, because we're not choosing to get drunk, they're not going to invite us. And she's like, well, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, but that's the stuff, to your great point, that like never got told to us. And you're right. Like we've got great community and great friends, but you still have like some friends you've been with for a long time. And then like, that's the shitty part about it that no one tells you. Hey, when you start to better yourself, some of your older friends may turn their backs because your discipline, determination, whatever it may be, brings out their insecurities.
Well, this could go into something else that's really valid too. It's like a lot of them say they're in the very beginning stages and they're trying to get their life around, might have discovered this already. And this is why a lot of people subconsciously, I think, drop off, is because they're experiencing that and it's too much. You know what I mean? Like when we talk about when people go through something like this, like I think that's what I'm talking about. It's the velocity of what you don't understand is going to happen. You know what I mean? So when somebody says, oh, just eat better and move more. No, it doesn't solve all these other ancillary things that are going to be happening in tandem. And in fact, like it's statistic. It's an actual statistic that they've been tracking for a really long time. When they forgot what the name of the study is, or I drop it here, but they track like married couples who one of the spouses decides to get healthy and the other person doesn't. It'll end up in divorce 70% of the time for that very reason.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's a chiropractor, and when my wife Annie and I met, we actually met when I was deep into powerlifting and she was doing some figure and fitness. And so there was a base of health and wellness in our marriage. And we openly talked about that before we got married. Like, hey, is this kind of like a season, or like, are you going to be dedicated to health and wellness for the rest of your life? And she was like, oh no, my father had a heart attack young, so I want to be able to be healthy. Same way. And I've had people who be like, oh, you're so lucky, like your spouse works out, like my husband doesn't. And I always go back to like, you could have had that conversation with that person when you were dating. Hey, health and wellness is important to me. I want to be around longer. I don't want to die early. But like that statistic right there, like 70%, what I see in my gym, I have way more females and mothers and wives showing up than husbands. I mean, way more. And if the husbands do show up, you may see them for 3 to 4 months because they can't put their ego aside and move well or embrace having to slow down. And so I see that. I see sometimes we have these women who come in and they crush it and they lose weight and they get in shape and mentally, physically, hormonally, they get better, but their husbands are not in the best shape. And then resentment starts to grow.
Yeah, totally. But I will add to that and say, like, you can have those conversations early on in a relationship, and it's not going to prevent like what happens when you're married, 10 years and something comes up that's tragic or traumatizing and something happens and that's how they cope. Conversation that you had 10 years ago just becomes really irrelevant because that wasn't factored in when you had that discussion. You know what I mean? You can't deal with that. You have to deal with what's actually happening right now, because whatever they're going through right now wasn't a question when you asked it 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's good. You said about like getting, underneath the surface and attacking some of the deep rooted things. What immediately came to mind is, well, Athena, that's not sexy, right? What's sexy is to post on social media like, hey, you want to get your butt bigger? You want to lose weight? Come buy this program. You'll look good naked. Not like, hey, you want to get to the deep-seated crap you've been dealing with and neglecting for the last 20 years? Come sign up here. No one wants to hear that. Yeah.
It's not sexy at all.
But the long-term success is that.
There might be like one day a week where I'll take a picture and I'll post it in my stories. I'm like, that was a good day. But for the most part, like, I don't feel like that. I feel like, like it's brutal. You know what I mean? Like, you don't feel pretty when you're sweating all the time. I don't feel pretty when I'm sweating and I'm hot and I'm tired, I'm sore. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a lot of effort to keep yourself in a deficit. Like humans weren't meant to be in a deficit for years at a time. It's a lot.
So right now you were minus 73. We're at the halfway mark.
Yeah.
So side note, we're halfway to Christmas and we're also closer to Halloween. Big Halloween fan over here.
I love Halloween, but I can get through Halloween now without the candy.
So 73, like you said, probably by Thursday, you'll be 74. Anything you think in the future, like, have you struggled with the holidays in the past? You have got a pretty good regimen now where you set yourself up for success.
It's hard to say, but I'd like to think that I've gotten far enough now where I'd like to think that I could get far enough now where it wouldn't be a problem. Do I associate certain things with holidays? Sure. But I think that's a lot of people do. And sometimes it's like, it's put on us, here's an example. There's a lady across the street where she makes this massive cookie tray for me, like this dessert tray for me. And she brings it over. She knocks on the door. She's like, oh, Athena, here you go, honey. And she's the nicest lady ever. You know, like, am I going to struggle carrying that tray from the door? You know, like making its way into other hands? Or I might. Might I have one? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe. I don't know.
Have you
Can't say
thought?
for sure. Hmm?
Have you thought what's the plan when you hit the goal?
Yes.
What does this look like? Like a party? Like it's 1999? Or just like a, all right, I hit it, on to the next.
Oh, I see it like being a party. Like Athena's
Nice.
going to podium. So, you know, there should be something there for sure.
I like that. Athena's gonna podium. Oh, I like that
Yeah.
concept. Yeah.
Athena's going to the CrossFit Games, remember? So, yeah, there should be like some kind of like something fun for sure.
So if we took out the body weight goal, right? What is
Yeah.
another goal you are striving for that may not line up with the weight loss that you want to see, and you want to see, excuse me, completed before the end of the year?
I don't know if all the other goals are going to be completed by the end of the year. I think that a lot of these are goals that I'm probably going to be working on like for the rest of my life. You know, like one of them was just like getting comfortable with, you know, when I'm in those stressful times to talk myself out of not using that as my crutch. Sorry. But
There's vodka in there.
but I have a feeling like that's probably going to be something that I work on. Like I very well could be working on it the rest of my life, but I'm okay with that. You
I
know,
like
like
that though too.
you're talking a lifetime of
Yep.
creating that. It might take a lifetime to unwind it.
I like though that you already know that, because I
I
think
know that.
sometimes people put like, hey, I've got to hit this by this date, and if I don't, well, I gave it my best bet and I'm done. But
And
you've
this is
gotten to
why,
the point.
like,
Yeah.
this is why the whole world falls apart, and this is why we quit, and this is why we get frustrated, is because those types of goals are set. You know, somebody actually was talking to me about the other day, and she's like, well, you know, Athena, if you know this, why did you give yourself an impossible goal? So first I asked her, well, like, what was the impossible goal? And she said, to lose 148 pounds in 1 year. Like, you're losing the other half of you. Like, you lost one half already, and now you're doing it again. Like, that's an impossible. That's what somebody would say is an impossible goal. So I was like, okay. And so she goes, if you're telling us not to set a numerical value to it, why are you doing it? And I was like, well, there's a difference. It was a valid question though, right? The thing though is like, you need to be able to set goals to act as your Northern Star, but be flexible enough to where your world doesn't fall apart. That's the difference. I'm always going to have a Northern Star. There's always going to be, you know, the goalpost where I put it. Now, where I may have to be flexible is time. It may take a whole lot longer than I thought. Maybe it will take longer than the year. Maybe it'll be March or April. I don't know. But I'm still going to like work my ass off every single day so that I can get as close as I can. When I get there, then I reset it. Then I can move it and say, okay, we tried to fit it in with these parameters. Okay, reset, just like you would a project. If something comes up and you have to re-baseline it. Okay.
Well said. Not being so rigid that you can flex from the time of the goal. The goal is still there, but not
Yeah.
being so rigid, because I've seen it at the opposite, where people are like, hey, I'm going to commit to training 3 times a week for the next 3 months. And if I don't lose X number of weight, or if I can't do this movement, then you know how to give it my best shot. And like, it's that mentality of like, hey, you're just trying to make it a season rather than a lifetime. So to your point, have that Northern Star that you're always going towards. That soapbox moment here. Like, I just still think it goes back to like people's lack of the ability to do hard things or want to do hard things in today's society. Like I had a friend of mine, she had been doing CrossFit long, and she was like, Gordon, someone messaged me today about doing a scaled competition, and I can't do all the movements, and I think I'm going to let him down. What do you think I should do? And I said, well, it sounds like your mind's already made up. And I said, you get uncomfortable every day and you do class, 4 times a week. I think you'll do great. I'm like, but do you want to get uncomfortable? They're like, oh, well, I just don't want to let the other person down. And it was like trying to get into her mind, being like, you're already thinking you're going to let someone down before you even give yourself a chance.
Right.
Give yourself a chance to see what happens before you just automatically say, well, I'm going to let him down. But one thing I challenge her in, she's a mom with 2 twins who are 2 now. So she's had a lot of life happen in 2 years. And I said, you have raised twin boys. You do hard every single day of your life.
Right.
Like nothing will pale in comparison to that. And so being able to understand like, hey, you're going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to last long. And like, it'll better you. And that's where I think like a lot of people just miss it. Like, hey, when you choose to do hard things, it's bettering every aspect of your life. And hard is going to be different every single day, right? My hard that was today may be different than my hard that's tomorrow. But as long as I'm striving and putting in effort for that Northern Star, that's the only thing I focus on.
And that's kind of the way it is for me right now. It's like there's going to be a Northern Star. I am allowed to reset that baseline or move the goalpost when that year is up. We'll see where we're at on January 15th. And then, next year might look like a completely different goal. It could go either way. What if I'm 20 or 30 pounds off? Okay, well, then we'll reset a new goal. Maybe it'll look like March or April. Who knows? Just an example. Or say I do get to the goal and then it's like, okay, now what? Well, first of all, we're CrossFitters, right? There's always going to be something.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now that we got the body into like homeostasis, okay, maybe we can shuttle back to working on some of those PR goals. Okay, now we can really start building strength now. What does that look like? I don't think like it's never going to be over.
When I feel like you've surrounded yourself with really good coaches in Miranda and Carolyn who are like going to be flexible enough to be like, hey, okay, we didn't hit this goal. Doesn't mean all hope is lost. What can we flex to make sure we get there? Rather than being so rigid, like, hey, you didn't hit it, we're done.
Yeah. Both, it was funny because both of them came out of the bat with like the same concerns. Like, Athena, like this is a huge, lofty goal that you're trying to do here. What's going to happen if you don't, I think that they don't want like some explosion to happen on January 15th, I think they're worried for me, don't want to see the same pattern that we saw the first time where life falls apart if we don't get there. So I think both of them came into this, very, very realistic. And that's the differences in the coaching, isn't it? I understand the rigidity, did I pronounce that right? Rigidity. I understand that to some degree, but we also have to be flexible because shit happens. Shit happens.
Very well said. Hey, we need to get a sticker. Scale Nation, shit happens.
Shit happens. Yeah.
So before we close out, I want to kind of touch on this. So talking to you, you have said repeatedly to me, like, man, Gordon, I'm just in a good place. I have a peace. And the Bible is very clear that there's a peace that passes beyond all understanding, right? That we will not comprehend and that we will not know. And you and I both live in this world and in this life that it seems that peace is this fleeting thing that a lot of us can't grab. And everything is going 1,000 miles an hour, right? And we're just going one thing to the next. And so to hear you say on more than one occasion, I've just got this peace, number one, is encouraging. But number two, you can see it. I can see it in the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. Let's say someone's watching this and is like, how the heck did you get that peace? How would you even communicate that?
Well, one, we have God and he does really amazing things. But two, I think a lot of that, like I had to pray a lot. I think part of that prayer in the last 3 months was just letting go of things that I I can't control, every day. It doesn't stop the motion. You know what I mean? You're going to wake up. You're still going to have like your job, your
Yep.
box, your people, right? None of this
Responsibilities.
stops. None of it stops. But I think like for me, adding some of those things that Carolyn implemented in that first month, I think just changed the trajectory of like how I just deal. You know what I mean? Like taking the time at the end of the day to just reflect and just pray and like let it go and like, okay. And I think a lot of that was giving myself more grace, like Athena, it's okay. Like today, like, can you celebrate? Like can you wake up and just be able to celebrate and be happy today that you got, like I'm trying not to cry. The world didn't fall apart. This is a freaking amazing day. Thank you, God, you know? And
And
just
it's
that makes me feel very peaceful.
and like learning to be grateful, right? And I think that's such a hard concept for us to grasp of like being grateful for like the littlest things, like being in the South right now, it is like 100 degrees here.
Hot.
And like I jokingly tell people this, but I'm like, hey y'all, be grateful for the fact that you have air conditioning because there are people in the United States, in other countries who do not, and it is sweltering. So like the more we can have an attitude of gratitude, like that changes things. Like what you said, hey, the fact that I can get up every day, move my body to better my body, which my belief is in turn you're stewarding your body and serving the Lord. Like that's freaking like how amazing is that? The fact that we
Yeah.
have that opportunity every day. And it's those
Mhm.
people who think like, oh, I have to do this. You got to change that perspective. The perspective is you get to move because there's going to come a day where your body may get to the point where it's not going to move very much anymore. And it's going to start to shut down a little bit. And so the fact that we have the opportunity to move our body and do it in a way that brings God's glory is like, it's unheard of. But getting people to understand that like, it's not a chore that has to be done. It's not a check mark. It's like, hey, I get to do this.
I think this goes in tandem with like the whole I get to. That was a concept that my first coach really, really instilled in me. Like my first coach from like years ago. And that was like one of the things that kind of changed everything for me was just that little switch of like, oh, I need to do this too. Like I get to. But I think this coupled with, like the first week that I started working with Miranda, she was sharing some things about her life, and one of the things that she reminded me of, I think that changed things, especially during this last quarter, was our burdens are different. All of us have a burden of some kind. They just look different. And when there's times when I've been going through this, and especially like there's times when I have felt resentful, like why has this been such a struggle for the last 10 years? And like, why do I have to go through this? And it's like, well, I might have to go through this and somebody else is dealing with, the loss of a parent or something that I couldn't even fathom. So it's like we all have different burdens, and having that sink in, I think has helped me, I think, be more grateful, just the dealing with just this shit that comes up, like, hey, this is my burden to carry and to fix. Somebody else has something else. Hey, Gordon, where'd you go?
So you see me? Weird. That like I have no idea what happened.
I was like,
I was like,
where'd
oh
you go?
no. The last thing you said though too was just like I loved what you said. Everyone has different burdens. We
Yeah,
all carrying burdens differently, and I love the fact that you said that.
I think that's the difference, like every time that I'm going through something rough and something feels really hard and I'm tired of eating cabbage, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's like so much easier to be grateful now. It's like, hey, there were things that you're learning during this year that you were meant to learn. And it's helping
Good.
you become the person that you are meant to be for other people because that was part of your goal. So as sucky as some of this shit feels like right now, like this is going to help someone else, because that was what I said I wanted, you know?
That's your
So,
audio clip right there that we're gonna cut and use for this video post because that was freaking
so
good.
true though, you
I
know?
do
Like,
like though, and, like we talked about this early on, like we're both big proponents that like God ordains things. If you look at all your coaches,
agree.
almost across the board, their belief systems and how they talk and what they think almost like aligns. Like, how freaking cool is that? Like, that's pretty rare, you know? And so I thought of that as we're talking. I was like, you have such a support from all different sides. And like, I know that all bleeds together, right? I'm sure Miranda's touching on a myriad of things. Same with Caroline. Like, I love that, just the support system you have. And the end result is what we've been talking about. You just have this level of peace that carries over to every aspect of your life. And the people around you see that and they benefit from that.
You know, something else too is that, you know, Carolyn and Miranda, and I think for the trio of coaches, you know, like what all three of you have to do is pretty small. It's not like small, meaning like it's not a huge, like for Carolyn, you know, like the investment is small, the time investment is very small.
It's not a huge ask.
No, no, no. But I think what it is for me, it's not so much like all the stuff that they're doing. It's more about, I know that I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Like, how is this going to come out properly? It's kind of like, okay, I'm driving a car, right? I'm the one driving. I'm in the seat. I'm choosing everything, the speed, the music playing, all of it. Every single one of my coaches is like my seat belt. Do I need it? Maybe, maybe not. But it sure gives me comfort having it. You know what I mean? I could drive without my seatbelt.
What
Do I
immediately
need?
came to my mind was like, one of the coaches is changing the radio. The other coach is backseat driving and pissing me off when I'm throwing stuff in the back of my head. And you're like yelling at us like your mom. Don't make me pull this car over.
I was like, shit, that would have worked too, right? Because that would have actually made it way more visible, or we made more. Yeah, one of them is the DJ. One of them is like the backseat driver.
Yes.
One is giving me directions, telling me about the GPS. You know, but
But you like it though. You know that seatbelt is there. It's for
I
your
know the
safety.
seatbelt
It's for
is
your
there.
benefit. Yeah.
It's for my
It's up.
benefit.
Yep. Up to you to choose to use it.
Right. I think it gives me peace just knowing that, like, yeah, you can go on it alone, but I
Mm.
like having that. I like having that person there in case I need it that day. Do I
Yeah.
usually take up people up on it? Rarely, but it's nice to have it when I do need it.
And this is the last thing I'll say, I swear.
But
So an analogy I always use for the men I taught in rehab, I said, we go through life using God as a fire extinguisher. So, you know, you see the fire extinguisher in these glass cases and always says break glass in case of emergency. So we'll
right,
run and we'll use that and it'll put out the fire. And then 99% of the time we put the fire extinguisher back in where it goes, just like how we put God on a shelf and we only run to him when we need him. And like that analogy in my mind is like, you don't use your coaches as a fire extinguisher. You use your coaches as just an everyday safety blanket, to say that's not the word, but an everyday opportunity to have someone be there to hold accountable, provide wisdom, provide guidance. And like you said it great, whether some days you want to or not, right? Like, I don't really want to reach out, but I know I should reach out. And like, I think that's what separates you, because I've worked with people before, like, well, hey, if I tell them, I'm like, hey, you're not a pest. I'm here to help you. And so like getting that through people's heads is so hard, especially if they have some, you know, generational things where they haven't been taught to ask help, or they think they should do it all on their own.
that made me think of something. That made me think of something just now. I had a weird flashback. Mm. I was like,
She's
how do I
thinking,
was
it's turning.
Hmm. This was one of those things that I cut out of the video. So we won't use names. So there's a podcast account. He's what I would consider what's the word? We'll say he has a lot of like European humor. And he does this, very tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff. And so right after, and I was getting all the new coaches, he does this reel and he's talking about, Athena is I'm gonna mess this up because I'm not gonna be using the right words, but basically like, hey, Athena just is on her roll with her media machine and she's got all these coaches and because gosh, what a great way to show people how realistic having 3 coaches is. And the thing goes on and on and on. And here's, as much as I want to say that's funny, it wasn't funny at the time. It wasn't funny at the time because in Minnesota, we call that passive aggressive. It's called Minnesota nice here, but I think the reason that I found it upsetting at the time was because it's like, wait a second. There's people out there that are going to say stuff to you if you're just sitting around on the couch and you're one of those people in the bucket of obese that's not doing anything. So somebody goes out there, something happens, and they're out there and they're fucking fighting for it. And then when they do, and it looks a little unconventional, but they're getting the support that they need, we're going to poke it again. We're going to poke it again because, gosh, is this realistic? Or, gosh, does Athena need 3 coaches? It's like, you're going to criticize people for not getting help, but you're going to criticize people when they ask for help or when they get the help that they, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the kind of stuff that will prevent people from getting the help that they need.
So I remember seeing that when it went off, know exactly who posted it. And all I thought was, that doesn't fit in his predetermined box of what he thinks help should be.
Right.
That he was like, well, this is what it should be. Says who?
Says
different,
who?
Different for everybody. And the fact that, like, how about we praise the fact that someone is choosing to get help, right? Someone is choosing to better their life and health and wellness. Praise that fact. But then again, some people choose to make.
That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, though.
Yeah,
like
they make comedy in light of others.
Something like that should be celebrated.
Yep.
You don't have to like, hey, Athena, great job with the coaches. I don't mean celebration like that. I mean like getting the help that you need should be celebrated, or saying, look, I had the chance to redesign this and redesign it in a different way to get the help that I think I needed so that I could finish this. Like we couldn't, like, why don't we focus on that kind of stuff?
Or
and
even
if we can't focus,
no, you go ahead.
That's the kind of stuff that we take into the box. You know what I mean? These weird ideas, because, when we think about it, people have all kinds of help. They have a chiropractor. They've got, who knows, maybe they've got an eye doctor. Maybe they've got a foot doctor. Maybe they have a massage therapist. They go to the beauty salon once a month to get their hair done. They go in, they get their nails done. They get the brows done.
I know women that are getting eyelashes, hair, nails. I got different people for everything.
That's what I'm talking about. But like, how is this any different? Is it different?
I like it though, because it goes back to what you said. Hey, I had a goal in mind. The original plan didn't get me to that goal. How can I be flexible, be adaptable, go back, say, oh, it needs to be this, and then still keep going towards the goal, rather than be like, well, it didn't work out. Tough shit, I'm done. Like,
screw it.
Yes, like that should be,
and
we should apply that to our affiliates. Like, hey,
you say screw it, yeah.
Yep, we have someone who came in, and hey, you know what? Maybe coming 5 times a week right off the bat was not the best thing, and they got burned out. Hey, let's change this goal, see what's feasible for your life, and then let's move forward. But we should be able to have the ability to be adaptable. And with you, right, that was a learning opportunity where you learn, hey, you know what? Having one coach may not be everything that I need. So I need to look to have multiple people in my corner. Awesome. That's what works for Athena. Now, may that work for someone else? Sure, maybe not. But we can't have these predetermined boxes of like one person to be the end all be all for everyone.
Well, here's what happens. I think when there's a one all be all is if something happens with that one all be all, you are screwed.
Get hit by a bus.
On one level, on every level. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying you're screwed because there's always a way out. What I'm saying is like when that happened, it was so disruptive. It was so disruptive. And if you think about like, you know, that was the design, right? If you think about like a teepee, I could probably lose one of them. What if something happened with one of those ones? You know, there's 3 and then one falls away. I still have the 2. And one could pick up the slack. You know what I mean? Like if there was something that I needed in those areas. If you only have one person trying to do everything, first of all, not only do I feel like that person is doing themselves an injustice because you can't do everything. You know, it's just like that conversation that you had earlier. How are you going to have that conversation with somebody saying like, what is that going to sound like, Gordon, when you have to tell somebody, hey, this friend that you've had for 22 years, you might have to cut it off. Are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to have enough know-withal to be able to deliver that conversation? Because it has to happen. This is what I'm talking about.
And I think, too, and that would be a conversation for the next time we meet. I think, though, too, when you went through everything, you were, I respect this, but you were not vocal about how that affected you, right? You were more like, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to move forward. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the internet and all the things that get posted into the internet, and people forget that there's humans behind the keyboards and there's real emotions behind the keyboards. And so you can make all these funny memes and you can make all these things that are poking fun, whether you think they're funny or not. But like ultimately there's humans behind that who are dealing with things. And I think that is very much missed. And, you know, one thing you and I talked about early on was like, there was a process of stuff that you had to go through and deal with that. And you weren't vocal about that.
I wasn't. I will say that some of that stuff that I had to work through during that time, like it was hurtful as hell.
Yeah.
It was so mean. It was so hurtful. You know, like, man, I was ready to fire back a video of my own.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
But I'm like, that's not going to get me closer to my goal.
No, great response. I love that. All right. Well, my kneecaps are sweating. I think it's about time I go shower.
Sounds great.
I know, right? Like,
Gordon, always a pleasure. Thanks for your feedback, by the way, doing those little, I still have one more.
Oh, I know. You're only on part 3.
I'm on part, no, I posted part 4 earlier today.
What time did you post part 4?
Oh, like 4 o'clock.
Oh, no, I was at the gym, so I've only saw part 3. I will go check out part 4. Vacation.
Yes.
Tell me one thing you're looking forward to.
Seeing my babies.
Perfect. See my are you going to drop it into an affiliate while you're there?
That is a great question.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Let me know. Let me know if you do. I'll hook you up with Katie Hogan. She knows everyone over there.
She does.
Yes. Oh, did you figure out who won the giveaway for your CrossFit Games tickets?
Gordon, you're gonna die.
Oh, okay. Well, it's the end of my life.
Nobody applied for it.
No way. Are you kidding me?
Didn't get a single one.
Really?
No.
So what are your thoughts now?
So I sold it.
Did you? Okay. Well, do I still get to meet that person for coffee?
Right.
Just some random stranger.
I'll give you the seat number and you go.
Like, hello. I'm supposed to take you for coffee. I'm Athena's friend.
You know, I don't. It was a really interesting thing because that's the first time I'm like I've done those. I've done those a lot, and I was shocked that I don't even know. Like, I was shocked. Didn't get a single one. Yeah, Chris said he had to sell his too. Yeah,
Well, Chris, I'll make your person too, Chris. Well, I'll just take them all out for coffee.
he had to sell his too. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get any. There wasn't anything to vote on. And I was like, this is a real bummer. I
That is a
thought for
bummer.
sure I was gonna get, you know, like, and it was a good seat too. It was on the floor, right by the where they go in, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it was a great seat. I was like, surely somebody like didn't, but whoever bought my ticket, I was like, well, they'd rather pay for it. Huh. I was like, okay, well. So anyway,
that's the
so I
people's
sold
loss.
it. Whatever.
That's the people's loss. All right. Well, hey, thank you for the time. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Of course. I'll chat with you later.
You got it. I'll talk to you soon.
Say yes.
Bye. Are you guys still here? My buttons disappeared and I can't figure out how to turn this off. Good grief. I don't know where my buttons went. I don't know where my buttons went. There's no end button. This could be a real problem, y'all. Garrett, you want to hang out with me or what? I don't know where my buttons went. Garrett, there's no button. There's no like end button or nothing. I'm going to be sitting here the rest of the night talking to y'all. There's no button. Send me a link. Garrett said, send me a link. Send you a link? Can I just leave studio? What if I just leave the studio? Does it go bananas if I do that? Okay, I'm going to try it. Hope y'all have a good night.